Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, the federal courts and the federal judges are fighting back. They are, in a very real sense, trying to protect we the people from a corrupt and abusive president of the United States and protect us from the flunkies in his administration who are willing to do his dirty bidding. A Trump-appointed judge named Thomas Cullen just ruled and ruled hard against Trump and his dirty DOJ officials who pursued this lawsuit that Trump wanted to bring against all of the federal trial court judges in Maryland. He didn't like the two-day pause that would slow down his administration's ability to, violate the due process rights of immigrants and deport them before the Maryland court judges could even read the briefs they filed and assess the claims they were making. So Trump had his DOJ file a lawsuit against all federal judges in the Maryland District Court. Well, today we're going to do things in kind of reverse order. I want to start by reading just a few sentences of Judge Cullen's new court ruling, and then we're going to shift over to the new reporting. So, in the case of the United States of America versus Chief Judge George L. Russell III, he is the Chief Judge of Federal District Court in Maryland. Here is the opening salvo of Judge Cullen's new opinion, and I'm going to take some time to walk through it and add some explanatory comments along the way. In May of this year, Chief Judge George Russell of the United States District Court for the District of Maryland issued two standing orders, that is, two rules of the court, prohibiting federal immigration officials for just 2 business days from removing or altering the legal status of any alien detainee, in other words, any person, any undocumented immigrant that they took into their custody that they were detaining, just a pause for 2 business days for those people who had filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus, meaning they wanted the court to address the legality of their detention. The court adopted these orders, the brief 2-day pause, to address the substantial increase in habeas filings, these kind of court filings, by alien detainees in Maryland, many of whom had been targeted by the government for expedited removal, deportation from the United States. Apparently, Chief Judge Russell and his colleagues were concerned that, absent a brief stay, this 2-day pause, many of these folks who were being detained, many of these habeas petitioners would be transferred to detention facilities outside the state of Maryland and thus outside the district court's territorial jurisdiction before a judge even had the opportunity to read their petitions, let alone rule on their claims. The chief judge explained as much in his order. So friends, from Judge Cullen's opening salvo in his new order throwing out Trump's lawsuits, you can see what was going on here. The chief of the federal district court in Maryland put a 2-day pause in the Trump administration's ability to start shuttling these detainees out of the state of Maryland before the judges even had a chance to read their court filings, read their habeas petitions challenging the legality of their detention. This was the chief judge trying to make sure that the Trump administration couldn't violate the due process rights of the immigrants they were detaining before the court had an opportunity to give them a hearing or even read their court filings, before the court had an opportunity to decide whether this detention and attempted removal, deportation was even legal or constitutional. You see the game the Trump administration was trying to play and why the chief judge put the 2-day pause in place. Okay, against that backdrop, now let's turn to the new reporting. This from the New York Times. Headline, Judge dismisses Trump administration suit against federal bench, all of the federal court judges in Maryland. The judge used the ruling to take President Trump and some of his top aides to task for having repeatedly attacked other judges who have dared to rule against the White House. And that article begins, a federal judge on Tuesday threw out an extraordinary lawsuit that the Trump administration had filed against the entire federal bench in Maryland, challenging a standing order intended to briefly slow down the government's ability to deport undocumented immigrants. In a scathing 39-page ruling, the judge, Thomas T. Cullen, called the suit novel and potentially calamitous, saying that the administration had simpler and clearly more legal ways to contest the standing order, aside from bringing a suit against all 15 federal judges who sit in Maryland. Judge Cullen, who was appointed by President Trump, went out of his way to describe the complaint as extremely unusual. Moreover, he used the ruling to take Mr. Trump and some of his top aides to task for having repeatedly attacked other judges who have dared to rule against the White House in a flurry of cases challenging aspects of its political agenda. This quote from the judge, quote, over the past several months, principal officers of the executive and their spokespersons, I would call these people collectively Donald Trump's flunkies, lapdogs, sycophants, yes men and women, all my editorial edition. Over the past several months, principal officers of the executive and their spokespersons have described federal district judges across the country as left-wing, liberal, activists, radical, politically minded, rogue, unhinged, outrageous, overzealous, and unconstitutional, crooked, and worse, Judge Cullen wrote. Although some tension between the coordinate branches of government is a hallmark of our constitutional system, this concerted effort by the executive, by President Trump and his flunkies, to smear and impugn individual judges who rule against it is both unprecedented and unfortunate, he, the judge, concluded. So, thank you to Judge Cullen for calling out Trump and his flunkies. You know, friends, there are lots of points of light out there, including many federal court judges who were appointed by Donald Trump himself. And friends, I know I don't really need to tell you this, but we need to keep fighting. We need to stay strong. We need to be determined, not defeated. We need to stand up. We need to speak out. We need to march and protest and rally peacefully, always peacefully. But remember, if you need to step back, you need to step away. You know, self-care is not just important, it's essential. So take time away, you know, recharge, replenish, rejuvenate, and then back to the fight. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.